Can this Ranger squad accomplish what the 1994 team did and eventually get over the hump after some setbacks? We discuss.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 1084 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So wanted to kind of discuss where the Rangers are at today and make some comparisons to the 1994 team. You know, that team obviously won the Stanley Cup championship, only championship that the Rangers have in the last 84 years. And that team, like this current Ranger team, took a little while to get over the hump. It wasn't until Messier's third year with the Rangers that, you know, it finally came together and they were able to get it done. And that team went through some adversity and had some low points. And you can draw some parallels between back then and this team. But what I really want to do here is tie it all together by talking a little bit about the E60 documentary on the New York Rangers called No Easy Victories that aired just 2 nights ago on Tuesday night. I'm sure some of you guys saw that as well. And if you didn't, I very highly recommend it. It was only an hour, and if you cut out the commercials, you know, watching it on demand or whatever, probably only about 42 minutes and definitely well worth your time. I did not realize going into the documentary how much of it was going to focus on the late NYPD patrolman, Steven McDonald. And obviously that's a name that's very familiar to a lot of Ranger fans because he's been synonymous with Ranger hockey for the last few decades. They do the Steven McDonald Extra Effort Award every year. He passed away in 2017, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, obviously he's somebody that was a passionate Ranger fan and just a, you know, heartbreaking, but also I'd say very inspiring story as far as what happened to him while he was, still an active patrolman. I should probably give the Cliff Notes because we could have some new Ranger fans or we might just have some people that don't really know the story. So I'll do that first. And then, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about the documentary and what I enjoyed about it. And then also tie it all back to comparisons between 1994 and this current Ranger team, you know, going through some adversity and can they eventually get over the hump. So as far as Steven McDonald goes, for those that may not know the story, this is kind of what I knew going in to the documentary. Again, former NYPD patrolman. He was shot and paralyzed on July 12, 1986. He was shot by 15-year-old Shayad Jones. And part of what makes this, you know, so tragic for me and honestly borderline infuriating is that there was just no need for this to happen. It was just a completely senseless act of violence. All McDonald was doing on this day was questioning Jones and 2 other teenage boys about some bicycle thefts that had been happening in the area. And without warning, without being provoked in any way that I can, you know, tell from, you know, obviously watching this documentary and also reading about it in the past, Jones pulls out a gun, shoots McDonald 3 times. He gets hit in the head, the throat, and the spine. And it's just, I mean, it's just so ridiculous. You're 15 years old. You're a minor. So anything that you do, like as far as like stealing something, you know, the penalty is only going to be so steep. And you go from, you know, being questioned about stealing bicycles to, okay, I'm going to shoot this officer 3 times and run away. And that's what he did. Obviously, he gets arrested and ends up in jail for 9 years. And once he finally got out, he died in a motorcycle accident 4 days after he got out of prison. What's amazing to me about this and, you know, something that I got to give, obviously, Steven McDonald all the credit in the world for this, because I don't think I'm forgiving somebody that does that to me. But he had said to the press that the 2 of them had spoke over the phone. It does sound like Jones apologized for whatever little bit that might be worth. And again, for me, that wouldn't be worth a whole lot if somebody shot me 3 times. But McDonald did say that he had forgiven Jones for what he had done. McDonald, after, you know, this happened, was paralyzed and needed a ventilator as well. His son Connor was born. And I didn't realize this, but Steven McDonald's wife was pregnant with Connor when the accident occurred, when he was shot. So his son was born not too long after that, followed in his father's footsteps, also joined the NYPD. And Steven McDonald, again, unfortunately passed away in January of 2017 at the age of 59. But just like I said, very inspiring that he continued to live his life. And the New York Rangers were a massive part of his life. He was there at, I don't know if it was every game, but it was the vast majority of games. Him and his son had their spot, behind the goal and everything. And, there were players in this documentary, we'll get into this a little bit later, that talked about how inspiring they were, and they were kind of a source of strength for them. Mike Richter and Adam Graves specifically mentioned that. But yeah, I really appreciate the way this documentary showed me the 1994 team through the eyes of Steven McDonald and his family. Because I know all the stories, and I know about the Messier guarantee and the, being down 3-2 against the Devils, and obviously a very edge of your seat final series against the Vancouver Canucks. I know about all those things, and those stories never get old, but it was cool to see it, from a different perspective here. And I definitely learned some new things. As I already mentioned, did not realize that his wife was actually pregnant. Steven McDonald's wife was pregnant while the tragedy occurred. Did not realize how close he came from dying from the incident. Obviously you get shot 3 times in those areas. You got to figure it's going to be life-threatening. But his partner, Jimmy Secreto, hope I'm saying that right, he was interviewed in this documentary, and he said when he saw Steven McDonald being taken away on the stretcher that he had the thought that might be my last time seeing him alive. And obviously that was not the case. He fought through it and was there to see the birth of his son and kept living his life, for many, many years after that. And again, it's heartbreaking, but it's also extremely inspiring. And it really does make you appreciate those little things, just being able to get out of bed every day, having legs that work, having, just being able to go about your day-to-day life in a normal way. It does certainly make you appreciate that kind of stuff. And I think the part about this that really hits you in the feels, at least for me, is you're watching this and, obviously Connor, he's being interviewed for the documentary. He was one of many people interviewed here. And he was talking just about how much the Rangers meant and continue to mean for his family. And, I never really thought about it this way, but, his father, as soon as he's born to a father that, again, is paralyzed, can't move his arms or legs. And, Connor's talking while being interviewed here about how there were just a lot of, normal things that, a parent and a child might be able to do, like hug each other, have a catch. And he was never able to do that with his dad. But the one thing that was always there for him and his dad was the Rangers. And he said in this documentary that no one could ever take that away from them. They bonded over Ranger hockey and they went to all these games, and it's just so cool to hear that. And again, it's one of those things like I should have been able to put it together. Obviously, hearing the McDonald family talk about the Rangers, they're legit fans. They bleed Ranger blue just like we all do. And, that they obviously mean a lot to that family. But when you hear it described like that, again, that's where it really kind of hits you. And that's where you realize, like, man, that's on a whole other level as far as what Ranger hockey meant to them. And just so many cool stories coming out of this documentary. And like I said, a lot of things that I did not know. And we're going to get into those in a second. As I mentioned, though, Mike Richter and Adam Graves specifically, they were 2 of many people that were interviewed for this. We heard from Messier and Neil Smith and Mike Keenan and, Howie Rose was on there a few times. He's awesome. He had the iconic Matteau call. But yeah, Richter and Graves both said that, they knew exactly where Steven McDonald and Connor McDonald were going to be seated. And they would look to those guys. They were a source of strength for them. They would look over there and, take some inspiration and bring it onto the ice with them. And obviously, it all ended that year with the Rangers winning the Stanley Cup. That wasn't the same year that the tragedy occurred, but eventually, the Rangers got over the hump and did win a Stanley Cup. And the McDonalds were in the building when that happened. But we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second here. I want to just talk a little bit more about this documentary, my thoughts on it, and, also get into, like I said, that there was some hockey stuff in here as well. Obviously, it's a documentary that features the Rangers, so we'll talk about that portion of it. And I'm going to draw some comparisons from the 94 team to this current Ranger team and talk about why I think it's still possible for this team to get over the hump. Because in 93-94, going into that season, I don't think too many Ranger fans were feeling all that optimistic. And lo and behold, it all came together. But we're going to do all that fun stuff here in just a second. All right, we just want to take a quick minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and even easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we just want to take a quick minute to thank everybody, as always, for tuning into the Locked On New York Ranger podcast. For the everydayers, you guys are definitely going to want to stick around. In our next episode, it's already recorded a little earlier this week. We're going to be calling out Chris Drury for not doing enough at the NHL trade deadline. Overall, I think Drury's done a nice job as the Ranger GM, but this is not going to go down as his best trade deadline. It will probably go down as his worst trade deadline as the Ranger GM, at least so far. We don't know what's going to happen next year. Hopefully it's a little bit better, and the Rangers will have the cap space and the assets to bring in, an impact player or two, because just didn't really feel like they did that this year. But for right now, let's keep the attention on this documentary. And again, highly recommended. A lot of you, I'm sure, probably watched it already. If you didn't, it's only an hour long. And if you take out commercials, watch it on demand, probably looking at only about 42 minutes. But again, just really enjoyed it. Enjoyed hearing all these different perspectives and seeing it through the eyes of the McDonald family, that run to the 1994 Cup. And as I mentioned a second ago, they got all the big names to participate in this: Messier, Leach, Graves, Richter, Keenan, Neil Smith. They were all there. They were all interviewed about this run. They all talked about the Steven McDonald Extra Effort Award. And, a lot of us are very familiar with this. They give it toward the end of the season every year, and it goes to the player that performs above and beyond the call of duty. Vincent Trocheck won it this year. I thought that was an excellent choice. Last year, it was Ryan Lindgren. I want to say it was Kreider the year before that. And, as far as like the history of this award, I think Graves has won it more than anybody. He won it 5 times. Messier won it twice. Brian Leach won it once. And again, they were all interviewed here. But Adam Graves and, the McDonald family were very close. I think him and Connor, Graves was talking about him and Connor bonding over the fact that, both their fathers were police officers. So that was a detail that I did not know either, at least about Adam Graves' father. But, as far as this documentary goes, if you're looking for like every single little hockey detail that happened in the 1993-1994 season, there are other documentaries that go into more detail about that. If you want to hear about the clashing between Mike Keenan and Alexei Kovalov and the way Keenan called him out publicly and talked about trading him openly, that's not here. If you want to hear about the impact that Kevin Lowe had on, a group of otherwise young Ranger defensemen, you're not going to get that here. This isn't that documentary, but again, I know all those stories. I've read about those stories. I've watched other documentaries that cover those stories. So I didn't really need to hear them again. I wanted something that was a little bit different, and that's what I got here. Again, the 1994 Cup run and just Ranger hockey in general through the eyes of the McDonald family. And there's other ones, I could recommend other Ranger documentaries. We got some time until we get to watch Ranger hockey again, unfortunately. So you go on YouTube, you can try Road to Victory, you can try Oh Baby, and there's one, I don't know if it even really has a title. It's just an ABC Ranger documentary, but they're all there. You type in 1994 Rangers, and that stuff will come up for you. With all that said, obviously, again, there was some hockey stuff here. I think this documentary did a nice job of painting, just how hopeless it can feel to be a Ranger fan at times. That they would have good seasons, but they would always come up short. And there was a lot of that covered here. They went through it pretty quickly, but the one thing that really stands out, and this is easy to forget, 1991, 1992, the Rangers win the President's Trophy. Awesome regular season. They get bumped in the second round by the Penguins, I want to say in 6 games. And then the following season, they missed the playoffs in 1992, 1993. That was the year before the Rangers won the Stanley Cup. So you go from President's Trophy winner and a disappointing second-round exit to missing the playoffs entirely to winning the Stanley Cup. If that doesn't tell you that anything is possible, I don't know what does. But Howie Rose had a great quote about that whole situation. Going from the President's Trophy to not making the playoffs, he said that was about as Ranger as anything we had ever seen. I would have to agree with that. I would definitely have to agree with that. But they run through all, the different failures, and, they lose the Capitals in 1990 in the second round, lose in the first round to the Islanders in 84. They kind of went out of order here, which I thought was kind of a weird way to do it. But they lose the Canadians in 86 in the conference final. They could never beat the Canadians for so many years there. They lose to the Islanders in 83. They lose to the Penguins in 92. You had Adam Graves talking about, all the chants of 1940 and how they had to hear that everywhere they went. But yeah, then of course it does cover the Rangers in the 1994 playoff run. And, it glossed over the first 2 rounds pretty quickly because that's not really where the drama was. They beat the Islanders into submission. They sweep them. They beat the Capitals in 5 games. And then the Devils series. It does cover Mike Keenan benching Brian Leetch in game 4. And I also thought, in other documentaries, they said that Mark Messier was benched during parts of that game as well. Maybe it wasn't quite as dramatic. Maybe he didn't lose as much ice time as Leetch did, and maybe that's why that was kind of glossed over here. But they really focus on Leetch. They pulled Mike Richter out of that game, and they only lost the game 3-1. And I think there were only 2 goals scored by the Devils when they pulled Richter, so kind of an interesting decision there. And it's funny because Mike Richter was being interviewed about, obviously everything, this entire run, the Devils series. And he was being asked about game 4 specifically. And he asked somebody off camera, I don't know if it was the producer or the cameraman or whoever it was. But he asked him, did I get pulled in that game? And they told him he did. And he kind of just laughed about it. But, one thing I really love is that, they do go back to game 6 and they spotlight just how important Mike Richter was in that game. The Rangers fell behind 2-0, facing elimination, and he made a lot of really spectacular saves to at least give the Rangers a chance to come back, which they, of course, ultimately did. There was also a funny story about Brian Leetch and him being benched, and I had not heard this one before, but he was benched in game 4, and he, talked about not really understanding it, and basically you'd have to ask Mike Keenan about that one. But apparently, Jay Wells, who was on that Ranger team, he saw what had been happening, and he realized that, Leetch isn't getting any ice time. What's going on here? And he told Leetch, just jump on the ice, just jump on. And Leetch said, no, I'm not going to do that. So that's kind of funny. It would have been pretty hilarious if Brian Leetch actually went for it and pulled that off. But yeah, Keenan said it was to be better as they progressed in the playoffs. I don't know, man. That's a hard sell. If you want to send a message to your team in the regular season, and okay, I'm going to bench Brian Leetch and I'm going to bench Mark Messier. I mean, hey, do what you got to do. But when you're in the Eastern Conference Final against this tough Devils team, it's an absolute dogfight, and you have a chance to go up 3-1, and you bench your arguably 2 best players. Can't really make any sense out of that one. But to bring it back to the McDonald family here, they talked about Game 7, obviously in Madison Square Garden against the Devils. And, winner take all, winner goes to the finals. And they go through, the Leetch goal. They go through the Devils goal where they tied it with 7 seconds to go. And it goes into overtime and double overtime. Connor, when he was interviewed for this documentary, said that his dad kept telling him, we're going to win it. We're going to win it. I guess he just never lost that faith, had the confidence, whatever it was, that the Rangers were going to find a way to pull it off. And of course, they did do that. And I love this. And they actually got it on camera. The Matteau game winner, I mean, we all, and unless you're very new to the Rangers, it was Stefan Matteau. We all know that. He scores in the double overtime, sends the Rangers to the Stanley Cup final. You get that iconic call from Howie Rose, Matteau, Matteau, Matteau. But they showed a camera angle of this that you don't see very often, where Matteau scored his game winner. And you can actually see Connor McDonald in the background. And, he's just a kid at the time. He's about my age. So I guess he would have been 7 or 8 years old, whatever it might have been. And he said in the documentary that he thinks he was the first fan to kind of jump out of his seat, realizing that the puck was in the net. And you can actually see that. It's not by a lot, but for that just fraction or 2 of a second there, Connor starts jumping out of his seat as a kid before any of the other Ranger fans around him react. It was just such a cool shot. And I have no idea why we don't see that angle very often. I think maybe Matteau knew first, but I think maybe and Howie Rose knew very quickly as well. It was Matteau, Howie Rose, and Connor that obviously found out, realized first that puck was in the net there, and just awesome. Just very cool to see. So just a cool shot, and one that you don't see often enough. And then of course it talks about Game 7, and just what a celebration when that one was finally over, and the entire McDonald family was in the building for that one as well. So that was cool to see. Additionally, and something that I really appreciate about this documentary, you don't have to be a Ranger fan or even a hockey fan to appreciate this. Honestly, even if you can't stand the Rangers, which I don't know why you're watching this podcast right now if that's the case, but you never know. We do get the occasional hate watcher and somebody that likes this team or that team. They'll come in here and try to give everybody a hard time. But you don't have to be a Ranger fan or even really a hockey fan to appreciate this. And like I said, if you If you want to know more about this 94 team, if you want to see an inspirational tale of, Steven McDonald and his legacy and how he just remains so relentlessly upbeat and positive, even after suffering a horrible break and just a senseless tragedy, then this is a great documentary to watch. And like I said, it's only about 42 minutes if you take out the commercials. So yeah, can't recommend it enough. In just a second, we're going to shift our attention to this current Ranger team, make a couple of comparisons from the 94 team to the current Ranger squad, and basically talk about why I think, a Stanley Cup is still on the table for this core group of players. They only fell 2 wins short from going to the Stanley Cup final this year. So we will get into all that in just a second. All right, let's go keep everything rolling here. I want to make some comparisons, like I said, from 94 to this current team. I see, and you've all seen it too, and you've all heard about it. And whether it's the YouTube comment section of this show or whether it's online, whatever it might be, there's people acting like it is completely impossible for this Ranger team to win a Stanley Cup. And I have always said, and I will continue to say, the number one reason why this Ranger team didn't win a Stanley Cup, the number one reason why past Ranger teams have not won a Stanley Cup, and the number one reason why other great teams around the league did not win a Stanley Cup this year, whether it's the Canes, the Bruins, the Stars, or one of the Panthers and Oilers, they can't both win it. One of them is going to lose. The biggest reason why any of these teams did not or will not win the Stanley Cup is because winning a Stanley Cup is really freaking hard to do. To begin with, there's 32 teams in the league. There can only be one champion. That's, of course, what makes it so special. And on top of that, it is the most difficult championship in all of sports to win because talent in hockey, it matters, but it doesn't matter as much as I think a lot of other sports. There's certain playoff matchups that you'll see in other sports where that team's got no chance and you can pretty much write them off. That's never the case in hockey. But yeah, people write the Rangers off and act like it's impossible, even though they had the best record in the league this year, even though they eliminated a very tough Canes team, closed them out on the road, even though they played 6 very close games against the Panthers. And obviously, Igor Shesterkin had a huge hand in that, keeping the Rangers in a lot of those games. But the facts are facts. All 6 games that the Rangers and Panthers played against each other either went into overtime or they were 1-goal games with less than 4 minutes to go on the clock. That doesn't tell me that the Panthers, mop the floor with the Rangers the way some people would have you believe. There were times where the Panthers were dominant, and I think overall you have to give the edge in play to the Panthers, but the Rangers were in every single one of those games, and obviously a bunch of them went into overtime, 3 overtime games. They were in it. They had their chance. They just wasn't meant to be this year. On top of that, the Rangers have a world-class goalie that always gives you a chance, and something else, because there's people talking about the core's old and it's time to blow it up. No, it's not. The Rangers right now, as currently constructed, the players that are actually under contract, the Rangers only have 2 skaters on their current roster under contract that are older than 31, and they do not have any skaters that are older than 33. So apparently, if you've got a team with 2 skaters that are older than 31, then you're washed up and you're over the hill and your window is closed. I don't believe that to be the case at all. It's certainly not impossible for this Ranger team to get over the hump. But I will say this, because I want to make some comparisons between this team and the 94 team that was obviously covered in that documentary. Think about if Twitter was around back then and social media was around back then, think about what Ranger fans, really be honest with yourself, and think about what Ranger fans would have been saying about the Rangers after they, in 91-92, won the President's Trophy and got knocked out in the second round. That would have been bad enough. I mean, people would have been cooking that Ranger team. I cannot even imagine the things that would have been said about that team back then, that 90s Ranger team, after the 1992-1993 season where they do not miss the playoffs. You would have been hearing it all. You'd have been hearing the same things back then that you hear right now. They're soft. They're overpaid. These guys have too many outside hobbies. Everybody's always on Mika Zibanejad for being a DJ and on Jacob Trouba for painting and whatever else. And there would have been stuff like that going on back then as well. They would have said, they missed their window. They don't have the it factor. Why did we bring in Mark Messier? It's another player past his prime. All those things would have been there. Trade Messier, trade Leach, trade Graves, do this, do that. Get rid of the coach. They did get rid of their coach, but get rid of the GM, sell the team. You guys know how it goes. And it's not exclusive to Ranger fans. A lot of sports fans of different teams, we tend to all overreact at times, but I think it's important to keep things in perspective here. There's not really anything a whole lot different about that team back then than this team now. The bottom line, really, you could make the argument that this team is in a better situation because at least this team this year, I mean, they're coming off of a season where they had the best record in the league. They did make it to the Eastern Conference Final. They were in all those games against the Panthers. The year before the 93-94 Ranger team won the Stanley Cup, like I said, they missed the playoffs, fell just light years shy of any expectations that team had that season. So you can't tell me that everything is so much different now and that this current Ranger team can't possibly get over the hump. I'm just not going to buy it. I do think this Ranger team is close. And obviously the hope is that, and Vincent Trocheck talked about this during a breakup day, the hope is that this Ranger team comes back that much stronger and that, the fact that they came up short the last 3 years, maybe that's just kind of making them tougher and forging their identity. I mean, look, this season turned out a heck of a lot better than the one before it. So hopefully next year there's enough there to go over the finish line. And obviously there's still some very good players on this team. And there's some players that are getting better. And Lafreniere is going to be a superstar next year. And I actually do have Vincent Trocheck's exact quote written into my notes here. So I'll read that for you guys. This is what he had to say about, just looking forward and the Rangers in general. I think this is the start of becoming our identity. This year started to mold our identity. The more we continue at what we're doing now, the more it will continue to get better. Throughout a season, you become a family, truly become a family. You become extremely tight with every guy in this locker room. So, yeah, for everybody that's like doom and gloom about the Rangers right now and thinks they have no shot, again, they might not win the Stanley Cup next year. This core might not ever get over the hump. They might not ever win a Stanley Cup. But to act like there's no chance, that doesn't make any sense either, because a lot of people would have been saying the exact same things. And like I said, probably a lot worse things about the 92-93 team. And I realize, the Rangers did mess with the core, not really the core of their team, but I guess the complementary pieces of their team in 1993, 1994. They traded a lot of young, skillful, promising players and brought in a lot of, grizzled veterans and guys that had been there and done that, and guys that had an interesting mix of, grit and skill. That's for sure. But be that as it may, it was a lot of the main players, the main pieces were very much the same. Messier and Graves and Leach and Richter. Those are the big four. You can obviously start there. But the Ranger team back then, I don't think a lot of people believed in them. Mark Messier was getting booed on opening night of 1993, 1994. And that, again, is the year that they won the Stanley Cup. So everything was doom and gloom back then. I don't want to say everything is doom and gloom now, because there are some Ranger fans that will look at this rationally and, be upset with the fact that they didn't win, but also realize that they're not that far away. They're right there in the mix. And, people say things, oh, they're frauds and this and that. No team that makes it to the conference final is a fraud. If you make it that far and you can get past the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, you're right there. You've got a shot at it. But the cold hard reality is, even at that point, there's 4 teams left and only one of them is going to lift the Stanley Cup. And at that point, all 4 teams think it's going to be them. Why would they doubt themselves? Why would they lack confidence? And, fan bases will start getting excited and it feels like it's our year and it's a team of destiny. But again, there's 4 teams left and only one is going to, lift the Stanley Cup in the end. So, yeah, figure we can pretty much call it there. But again, if you didn't watch the documentary, definitely check it out. Well worth your time. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section or send me an email. And speaking of emails, we're going to do a mailbag episode pretty soon. I've already heard from a couple of you guys. No real theme, no real topic here, just a mailbag and hearing from the listeners and anything you want to talk about the Rangers. Why you think they fell short this year, or why you think that they have a chance next year, or what moves have to be made, which free agents should be brought back. Is there a trade target around the league that you'd like to see the Rangers go after? Send me an email, or you could even send it in audio form. If you send it in audio form, I can actually play it on the podcast. So that's also an option as well. But yeah, figure we can pretty much call it there for today. Once again, if you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.